Hey guys, so today I've got another one of my dad's sketches. He wanted me to come up with something of my own based on this sketch of his while he does his own version in watercolor. So I haven't seen what he's doing, and right now he's seeing this version for the first time. So it'll be really interesting to see where he goes with it and how we took it in different directions. And as I'll explain, I tried to I tried to go in a direction that I thought there's no way that he would go. So firstly here, I'm just trying to decide what I want to do with dad's sketch, what I'd like to maintain, and what I want to change about it. Adding some more perspective and thinking about a composition which will maintain the overall idea of his drawing. I have to maintain most of what's going on, since that's the whole point of working from his drawing. Otherwise, I might as well just start from scratch if I'm going to change everything so drastically that it's not even recognizable. I didn't have any particular composition in mind beyond what dad already did, but I did know I wanted to go dark with this image, and I want to differentiate it as much as possible from what dad will do. And I know I'm making assumptions about what he'll do, but because I haven't seen his image yet, but I feel pretty confident that he won't go kind of dark fantasy with it. The beauty of personal work is being free from time constraints. In this case, as with many of my personal works, I decided to start with a fairly resolved line drawing, and this will result in a less painful painting process, since I'll have a pretty clear idea of where and what things are already. There are little details I'll be sure to include, like the little stone wall that he has and the placement of the trees, just to make sure I don't go too far off track. I decided to make the roofs of the houses thatch, just to differentiate it even more, since I'm pretty sure that he's going to go with more like a shingle roof or tin or something like that, just based on what I can tell from the drawing and what I know about him and the kind of thing that he usually draws. I think it's important to practice line drawing, as I've said before, in your personal work, but on top of it being good to practice for your fundamentals, I also just find drawing so much fun, and anytime I'm not under a time constraint, I'm trying to do it as much as possible so I can keep getting better. And that's actually something that I got from my dad, is the love of drawing, and it's something that he was always doing when I was a kid, constantly drawing in his office, and I'd be standing next to him, just watching what he's doing, trying to understand why he's making certain lines and why he's choosing to draw certain shapes. And I found that really mesmerizing, and I think that's a huge part of why, even though most of what I do is painting, I always come back to drawing in my sketchbook with pencils and pens, and even in Photoshop, just doing line drawings. My dad and I always seem to connect on things that we find appealing, even if what we create personally is so different. For most other people in my life, sometimes I'm unsure if they'll like what I like about something or see why I like something visually. But with dad, it's like we have such similar tastes, not just visually, but in a lot of other ways. Like, our sense of humor is really similar. We like the same TV shows, and we find the same parts in movies funny, and another way we're really similar is we're both extremely introverted. So yeah, we're similar in a lot of ways. I've said this before, but having a line drawing like this is really satisfying, since even if the image fails, you still have this drawing, an earlier successful version before I've ruined it with painting. In this case, it's not my best painting, and I liked it a lot more in the middle stages than what I ended up with at the end. That just happens sometimes, and it's important to understand that you can't make every single piece of art your best piece. It'd be nice if that's how the progression worked, but I don't think it's realistic, and there are just going to be some pieces that you like less than others. The most important part is that you just keep moving on to the next piece and remembering what you learned from your not so successful pieces. And if you don't practice enough, the things you learn from failure and repetition will just be forgotten by the time you sit back down to it. That's why it's so important to stay consistent when you're practicing any kind of craft, because you learn through your failings, and that has to be fresh in your mind to actually be useful to you the next time you're going to try. So now I'm indicating where all the major light shapes will be. This will help me simplify and group my values and my light and dark areas accordingly, and keep a nice simple read overall. So all I did is I painted a shape just with a opaque brush, and then I clip it to the layer and change it to multiply mode and just lower the opacity until I can see the really kind of readable graphic shape. Next, I duplicate my line layer for the foreground, midground, and background. So I separate just the foreground lines, and I kind of group them with the foreground. And I do the same with the midground. This is so I can paint with a soft brush and add atmosphere between those layers, and it will go over the lines. It's not going to matter in the end, because obviously there will be no lines by the end. But just at this stage, it's helpful to start seeing the mood and imagining the image as a three-dimensional space, and start imagining it without the lines. As always, I'm using a gradient map to add color to the image and to get myself a very basic starting color palette. So I've explained this before. The way these work is you can assign a color to specific values in your image. So you can assign the darkest values to be blue, for example, and you can assign the lightest values to be a light yellow. And you can also add nodes to create midtones, which you can assign colors to. So if you're just starting out with these, I would just recommend creating a color for the dark value, the light value, and a midtone. And just with that setup, you can get really nice results and create enough color variation to give yourself just a basic mood and kind of a color palette that you can just start with and start painting on top of. One of my earlier videos called Sketch to Color, I actually go through the process in real time. So if you want a full explanation of how it works and exactly what I do, you can just go watch that video. I might make a newer updated video on the process in the future, just to go over that process in detail again. This is my main process for adding color, since it just makes the most sense to me. I find it just clicks with me more than using adjustment layers and color blending modes and getting really specific about coloring each individual aspect with overlays and color modes and multiply. That some people can do that really effectively. For me, I like to just do a really basic overall palette, and then I can just start building up the colors from there. It's the quickest way I find to see the colors in the context of the image and have a solid direction in almost no time at all. It's also great to have a color reference to refer to while you're doing this part, so you can use that reference to guide the colors that you pick to assign to your different values. I would recommend just sticking to one reference, especially if you're just early in your learning stages. Stick to just one so that you don't overcomplicate your colors and start guessing. Just stick to one solid reference that you like and try and understand the colors that they're using and use your gradient maps to match it as closely as possible. After I have a nice base from the gradient maps, I just start making selections and using the color blending mode to indicate different materials like wood and grass and stone and stuff like that. Also, I'm trying to keep in mind the local colors and which materials are going to be a lighter value than others. This stage can look pretty ugly, especially if you are new to painting and don't really have a strong understanding yet of how light behaves when it hits different materials. So as you learn and improve, this ugly phase becomes easier to suffer through because you'll have more confidence that you'll be able to execute in the end. I still struggle with confidence sometimes, and on really bad days, it can feel like I'm just wasting so much time painting and correcting things over and over and over, to the point where I question if I even know what I'm doing anymore. But what gives me peace of mind is knowing that those days grow farther and farther apart the more I practice. It used to be kind of 50-50 if I was going to have a good art day or not. And now that feeling of total discouragement and frustration is much more rare than it used to be. As I've said before, being fast does not mean physically going fast, picking colors and making quick paint strokes and being really fast and proficient with a software. Being fast just means, in my opinion, making fewer mistakes. And with time and repetition, we can see pitfalls coming in our process, and therefore we can avoid them entirely. This is also why I try to challenge myself and go outside my comfort zone regularly. I don't want to have only one subject figured out, so to speak. I want to have some freedom to create whatever I want without feeling completely unqualified to even try. I'm not by any means really close to that reality, but I'm trying really hard to push myself to try new things or, learn things that will improve my weakest areas. So now I've got my colors pretty well planned out, and I'm just painting directly now on 3 major layers with some atmosphere layers in between. So this is where the painting looked the best, in my opinion. It was dark and moody and more mature and restrained in terms of my values and my color saturation. The mood actually for this was inspired by Dark Souls, because I've been playing the first Dark Souls lately in the mornings before work sometimes, and those games are my favorite games of all time. I absolutely love how atmospheric it is, and I'm super into that kind of subtle and really poetic kind of lore and dialogue, and just the atmosphere of the whole world. I find it super inspiring, and it inspires a lot of the stuff I do. So that was definitely, just because I've been playing it, it's fresh in my mind. That was definitely in my mind the whole time I was doing this painting. By the way, I think the whole image took me maybe I think it's 8 or 9 hours when I put it in my Adobe Premiere timeline. I think the real-time process was about 8.5 hours. So at one point, I think I worked on it for too long one day and kind of lost objectivity, and I felt the need to push the colors and the values. And in hindsight, I think it was a mistake, because as soon as I did that, it just lost the kind of subtle and more subdued palette that I had going. It's one of those things that once I watched the process back and saw that point, I regret making that choice, but I've already finished the image and I can't go back. So it's just an example of one of those things that you got to try and remember this kind of stuff for your next image, and maybe I can avoid making that same mistake. So I spent a fair bit of time on the foreground in the image to give a more illustrative feel. Something kind of like an animation background. And my first job as a professional was actually doing backgrounds for animation. My dad actually ended up working in animation as well. He was a hobbyist, and at the time that I started working in the industry, I was living at home with him and my mom, and his watercolor paintings are hanging all over their house. So I remember one day just kind of looking at one of his paintings, and I said to him, I think you could get hired with just your watercolor paintings as a portfolio and maybe a few digital paintings. And he ended up learning Photoshop and submitting his portfolio around and getting hired doing the same job that I was doing. He always supported me when I was a kid and pushed me to pursue my interests, and it's the only reason that I had the confidence to share my work and believe that I could be a professional. So it felt really good to be able to instill him with some of that confidence that he gave me, and to see him recognized for his ability. My dad didn't have the support to pursue art in his youth, so his encouragement in letting my passions guide me through my life is a testament to his character, and I'm super lucky to have a dad like him. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you like this kind of thing. I love collaborating with my dad. Obviously, it's really fun to take one of his sketches and see how I can twist and change it to try and make it look like one of my own pieces. And at this point, he hasn't even seen it yet, me recording this video right now, as of now. So I'm really excited to see what his looks like, because I don't know, and I'm excited to see what he says about mine. Let's hope he feels like I took it in a good direction. But yeah, keep an eye on his channel, because I think he should be, I'm not sure when, but I know he's working on the same image, and he's gonna make a video about his watercolor process. So go over to his channel, Gary Frederick Art. It's really great. It's super casual, and he makes a ton of really cool stuff. Thank you guys, as always. I say this every time, but I feel overwhelmed by the amount of support my channel has gotten the past couple of years. It's really, really cool. I really appreciate all your subscriptions and your likes, and especially your comments where you guys share your feedback, and you know, I can get to know some of you guys a little bit. So it's really cool, and I really appreciate it. I hope you guys got something out of this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.